What is Vladimir Putin thinking now that Ukraine has turned the tables on him and invaded Russia? Well, let's bring in someone who knows Russia very well, Dan Hoffman, former CIA station chief and Fox News contributor who spent 5 years in Moscow. You know, Dan, he's got to be stunned. He's got to be embarrassed. I mean, look, they've also attacked, Ukraine has attacked Russian airfields inside Russia, sunk warships, claimed to sink a submarine. What's going on in Putin's mind now, do you think?
Yeah, this is not at all how Vladimir Putin envisioned this war playing out, and he can try to build up his Potemkin village of propaganda and disinformation as much as he likes. But his own citizens know that Russia has spilled a massive amount of blood and treasure in this ill-fated war. And all Russia has to do is stop raining down hell on Ukrainian civilians, and it can end. But this latest incursion from Ukraine, an intelligence failure, that has to strike Putin particularly hard. He fashions himself as the KGB operative in the Kremlin, the master spy, who served as director of the Federal Security Service, the FSB, before he became prime minister and president of Russia. It was the FSB border guards who failed to spot Ukrainian military reconnaissance before they launched the attack and failed to do anything about the attack once it took place. So, again, another example of a massive intelligence failure for Putin, going back to the early days of the war where he failed accurately to assess the will and the capacity of Ukraine to stand up to Russia's army.
How significant do you think is their advance? What will Ukraine do? How much land could they take of Russia? And what will that mean for the ultimate end of the war?
Well, I think there's three impacts. I think in the short term, for sure, Ukraine is destroying Russia's military capability. They're targeting air bases, and that's important. Secondly, in the longer term, Ukraine is creating a buffer zone. So if at some point we reach a point where perhaps there are negotiations for a ceasefire or a peace deal, Ukraine will have a lot more leverage. And third, Ukraine is really impacting Russian morale. Putin had promised that Russian conscripts who were serving in these areas in Kursk and in the Belgorod region would not see action. Well, they're the ones being targeted. They're being killed or they're being captured by the Ukrainians. And almost 200,000, reportedly, almost 200,000 Russians have been forced to evacuate the Kursk region. And so that kind of belies every point that Vladimir Putin has made about the war, his own citizens, but maybe more importantly for his future. His own security services and senior Kremlin advisors and military understand that it's Putin who's to blame for this. Putin likes to talk about the vertikalnaya vlast, the vertical of power. Whatever success Russia enjoys is on him. Well, failures as well are his responsibility.
You talk about the conscripts, young men with really no military training. New York Times has a fascinating piece today where they interviewed some of these who have been taken prisoner by Ukraine. Let me read you what the New York Times article said. Quote, "They were called abandoning their positions or surrendering as they found themselves facing well-equipped, battle-hardened Ukrainian forces streaming across the border. We ran into a birch grove and hid. We reported to commanders," said one, but they didn't react. They said, well, there's nothing we can do about it. I mean, that's just the Russians, realizing giving up and overmanned and overpowered.
Yeah, and Ukraine found a soft spot and took the fight to the enemy. And look, the Biden administration needs to embrace the unexpected. Perhaps we didn't expect Ukraine to go on the offensive. Apparently, Vladimir Putin didn't. But embrace the unexpected, and let's not apologize for being the arsenal of democracy. Reportedly, the United States is not approving the Ukrainians to use British long-range artillery Storm Shadows or ATACMS in Russia. Let's just open up the aperture and let Ukraine finish the job. Again, Russia took this war on themselves, and they've killed an inordinate number of Ukrainian civilians in maternity wards and neighborhoods and hospitals. It's got to stop, and the best way for it to stop is for Ukraine to carry on fighting so successfully as they are.
And finally, do you think that Britain should send those Storm Shadows and we should send long-range artillery so that we can hit Russia, Ukraine can hit Russia, and finally bring this war to an end?
I believe so, and I also believe we should be listening to one of the foremost military experts on the planet, General Jack Keane, a Fox News contributor. I don't miss a word he says or writes in his Institute for Study of War. General Keane has argued just that very point, and I would strongly agree with his assessment.
That for Ukraine to hit Russia, possibly bring it to an end. Dan Hoffman, as always. Dan, good to see you. Thank you.